Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
All right, so here's a little bit of a coincidence. You know, with the snow around the country, I wanted to see some of it since we're here in Florida. So I have this thing called EarthCam, and you can go to, North Carolina and see the snow, right? And say, oh, there's snow. You go to Michigan, see the snow, right? So I go to this EarthCam app, and they have one in Dallas, Texas. And the screenshot that they use is a picture of John F. Kennedy. And I looked at that and I said, gosh, we all don't really know whatever happened that day. We think we do. We had some certain conclusions. And what was it with Lee Harvey Oswald? Why was he killed suddenly? What was going on there? And there have been so many books written about this and so many movies made to explore the possibility that there was some kind of a collaborative effort or a conspiracy, if you will. Well, what would happen to you if you had some information from one of Kennedy's secretaries that actually would change the way we think about the Kennedy assassination? You know what would happen to you? You'd be put in prison. Yeah. That's exactly what happened to Christopher Fulton. He's on the phone. He has written a book called The Inheritance. Christopher Fulton worked in the commercial high-rise construction industry in Vancouver, British Columbia. He was extradited at the age of 33 and spent years, Robin, in federal prison for his possession of physical evidence in JFK's assassination. The book subtitle is Poisoned Fruit of JFK's Assassination. By the way, submitted for the 2019 Pulitzer Prize. And P.S., if you think it stops with Kennedy, it doesn't. Name every president since. I don't know if I saw Carter on the list, actually, but I saw Trump on the list. So yeah. I'm curious to find out about this. Christopher Fulton, you certainly have an interesting story. Good morning.
Good morning, Larry. How are you?
I'm good. Where are you? Where are you calling from?
We're out here in California.
So, was it Evelyn Lincoln? Was that the secretary's name?
Evelyn Lincoln was President Kennedy's personal secretary. She was with him for 12 years and probably the closest person to him on a daily basis other than his brother, Bobby Kennedy.
And did you know her?
I knew her through my friend, Robert White. We were both in Maryland, and he was subsequently became her kind of substitute family. She didn't have any family of her own. And Evelyn had kept a large amount of information that came out of the Kennedy White House, along with Robert White's private investigation of what happened to his brother. And this material was raw and was not put through the processing of National Security Review or any of these other types of reviews. And subsequently, after Robert Kennedy's death, she was instructed to keep all of this deep six for the protection of the Kennedy family. And of course, once she passed away, that came to him, willed to him, private citizen, so that it would not fall under the guise of the FBI or the CIA, NSA, White House, or any federal agency. So she was done as she was instructed to do, and in the hopes that this would come out to the American public at some point. And of course, I'm the last in line. I was kind of hoping I wouldn't be the one doing this, but as it turned out, I'm the one that is putting this out.
Okay, so you were put in prison, I'm assuming, to protect somebody else, correct?
Well, I was put in prison because in 1998, both Robert and I were through the Security Oversight Office and through the Assassination Records Review Board that was run under President Clinton. We both were declared to have national security information that was deemed inappropriate for private hands, and that material needed to be confiscated and classified, and that's exactly what they did. The FBI came in and began taking pieces of information and materials and evidence in this case and classifying it away so the American public would not be able to see it.
How did John F. Kennedy Jr. figure into this equation?
He was very interested in purchasing or acquiring the evidence that was in my possession, which actually Bobby Kennedy used to prevent World War III right after the assassination, and prove that President Kennedy was hit in the front forehead during the assassination. So he was very keen on picking that evidence up from me and then utilizing that at some point, along with a lot of other information that he has collected. and an interview with Castro to go out in George magazine, which not have been censored for the American public. It would have come out and changed the picture of the United States.
Really? So the thing you were put in prison for was what? Not relinquishing the information, or I'm not sure why wasn't Robert Kennedy Jr. put into prison?
Well, my friend Robert White, he was issued a subpoena was issued for him in 1998 to the Justice Department. He was going to be debriefed, and which he was, and then the material was confiscated from him by the FBI, and they secured that, and he signed agreements with the Justice Department and the Kennedy family, which is also classified. The evidence that was in my possession was of such that I was compelled to testify under the warrant that was issued by Frank Hunger of the Justice Department under Janet Reno, but they decided that I was not going to be allowed to testify in front of the ARB. That the evidence in my possession was of such that it would change the narrative completely.
Okay.
And so they issued a sealed warrant indictment, and the whole purpose of that was to get me clamped down, get me away from the public, get me out of the ability to speak about this, and then of course secure the material that covertly, and then get me debriefed. It took about a year, but they wanted me debriefed without constitutional rights, without a lawyer. They put me on the 10 most wanted list for a short while, which they claimed was a mistake. But they put me into debriefs with the Justice Department intelligence community. They wanted to know how far this went, who I was working for, what the plans for all this was.
So, since John F. Kennedy Jr. was accumulating all of this, do you think his death in that plane accident was an accident?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to speculate on that, but I will say that I felt that there was going to be a change in this country in 1998. I felt very confident that was going to take place, and then when JFK Jr. died, I got news of that. I was in federal prison, and I was very saddened by that information. We lost someone that could have made a big change in this country.
All right, and I misspoke earlier. I said Robert Kennedy Jr. I meant JFK Jr. So you had I'm still unsure. What years were you in prison?
I was arrested at the end of 1998, and then I left. I think somewhere around 2008.
So does the book include the information that got you in trouble in the first place?
The book is written in a way that it really just takes you on the insider ride that I had taken, which included being, we were briefed by President Reagan. I was contacted by CSIS, which is the Canadian Intelligence Services. I was also briefed at the Kremlin about this information through their head of intelligence, General Alexander Levitt, when I was in Moscow. So it goes through the whole process of this, what was happening behind the scenes, how we were trying to get this information. Originally, I tried to get some of it back to the Kennedy family in 1996, but it goes through all of this process and what finally concluded, and how the Justice Department got on board and took this over. They are basically in charge of this whole ordeal, and they're the ones that make these decisions on how this is going to be handled.
So help us understand what would have been different if this information had been released in the very beginning.
You're talking about released at the moment after the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah.
Well, we would have been placed into a position where we would have been probably, in all likelihood, gone to a nuke exchange with Russia.
Because they were somehow behind the assassination?
The assassination was set up in such a way to be originally, as the idea, the concept was a false flag operation to shoot the President of the United States, to put him in a position to invade Cuba and then take us to war with Russia. The Kennedy White House was looking at a first strike out of the Pentagon to hit Moscow first. The brothers were reviewing that, and of course they were looking at 42 million American dead on a first strike in Moscow. So they said, no, we're not going to do that. Even though these plans have been set and talked about and discussed and reviewed since World War II, the Kennedy brothers took a 180-degree turn in 1962 with the Central Intelligence Agency, and they decided to go against the policies of the acting government. Of course, they were actually at war. I was the first person to listen to these recordings that President Kennedy had made to protect himself, to keep everybody on record. And these were all done in secret in 1962. And I was also spoke at length with the man of the Secret Service that put those recordings in place for the president. But the facts remain. When you listen to this, you can understand very clearly that they were at war with their own government, and of course trying to enact a better policy of peace and acting on behalf of the American public, not for the way that the Pentagon or the intelligence services thought things should go.
Why is this? Why has the Kennedy assassination survived all of these years still with all the questions?
Well, because I think people realize instinctively that they've been lied to. I think that there's a feeling that we took a wrong turn. Of course, we did. There's no doubt when you go back and you review the materials and you listen to this and you realize very clearly, and it's an extremely sad part of our history. And this has been covered up and covered over, and people realize that there's something wrong. But of course, all they can go is from misinformation and what the general consensus was put out. Now you got to remember that Bobby Kennedy had to be made complicit in this. He was the one in control of his brother's autopsy materials, and he was the one that could have changed the narrative very quickly. He was aware of what happened within 24 hours of his brother's death. But he was also facing a position that if he had taken that information and gone to the American public with it and maybe initiated a coup, which against the Johnson administration, of course, that was an illegal administration. That's what the Russians thought that he should have done, but that in effect that would have taken us to war. They had pre-planned this, and of course the evidence was pointing in such a way that Cuba was the catalyst. If we had invaded Cuba militarily and taken that in a way that around Kennedy's plans, the object was to go to war with Russia.
So take us to the point in time when it says in your bio that you have in your possession information. Does that mean physically, like in paper, or was it just something that you were told verbally?
Well, imagine this. Imagine all the important documents that were whisked out of the White House immediately after the assassination, which included all the memorandums, the president, all his personal correspondence, there were secret recordings that were in the Oval Office, the evidence that his brother Bobby collected for his own private investigation to find out what happened to his brother. We basically were reviewing all of that.
So take us into that room or at that time. I mean, when you first started reading things, oh my gosh. I guess you've already told us.
It's overwhelming. It is. So it's a very overwhelming amount of material. It took us quite a long time to be looking at all of this. But and of course, it's an overwhelming thing to be in possession of this kind of history of the United States. And of course, you're in direct contradiction with a lot of things,
right,
including people in the Kennedy administration who have lied.
But
after the fact?
But how did the Secret Service know that you knew? I mean, were they somehow tapping your phone or something? Or how did they know?
You're talking about my dealings with them after the fact, or
if you went to jail because you had this information, you went to prison because of the information. Were you publishing the information? What told them?
Yes, that's what got us into problems. The government understood, and of course the CIA was briefed about this right away. That these materials had transferred. Even the CIA and the Kennedy family did not know what we had. This material had not been reviewed. It had been taken by Evan and Lincoln and kept secured away from any of the investigations. This has not gone through the House Select Committee. It didn't go through the Warren Commission. Did not go through the AARB under President Clinton. So this information is raw. It's unedited. It's non-security reviewed.
Gotcha.
So when we're going through this, initially the government took a position. Well, we're not going to, no harm, no foul. We're not, as long as they're not doing anything with it, we don't care. It went through a legal court proceeding. They own it legally. We're not going to touch it. But as this thing proceeded, as it went through the process, and I contacted the family in '96, and they were very concerned about this. And of course, at that time, they took a position they did not want to take this on. So as this continued, it started to go public. CNN got involved. It started to go out there and leak, and then of course the Justice Department fell all over it. They at that time they had to move.
Has Caroline Kennedy Schlossberg been in touch with you about all of these revelations?
She's never spoken to me directly about it. She refuses to speak to me about it. I contacted her in 1996 through Warren P. Whiteman, who is the vice president of Sotheby's. He had handled the Jackie O sale for them, and I thought it was the best interest to get this very important material back back to her, back to the family, so they could make the decision themselves and decide how they wanted to deal with it. But at that time, she had taken some of the material that I'd sent over for review. She came into the offices right away. She looked at it for about an hour in private, and she told them, I'm looking at this with my Uncle Ted Kennedy, and I'm not going to discuss it right now. That's the last I heard of it.
Huh. So you had encounters with Reagan, with Clinton, and with Trump. What were those encounters? What was that about?
Donald Trump, before he was president in late 1997, had discussed this with Robert White, a friend of mine, and he was interested in promoting the idea of these things coming forward to the American public. He put a lot of these objects up in Trump Tower in '97 for review, and said there's going to be an auction on this. The best way to get this out to the American public, they can start breaking and seeing this. So that was his involvement. President Reagan's involvement was much different. He actually called my friend and Robert White to discuss this specifically in his offices in California, and said, these materials are what Bobby Kennedy had held back. That these materials were being fought over. These materials were the things that are going to change the official position. Now you're not under a Securities Act on this, and there's going to be interested people about this, and you're going to have to testify, and they're going to confiscate this. And if you don't cooperate, they're going to go hard on you. And he thought that the American people deserved to know this, and it was probably time for us to pray about that, and that as Americans we have to figure these things out for ourselves and fix our own problems. But he certainly didn't want this coming out from a foreign government.
Were you ordered in some way or another to not talk about this once you were let out of prison?
The agreements I signed with the Justice Department involved the protection of my family and myself from the materials that were reviewed and looked at, not only through the United States, but the United States gave me protection from foreign governments on this as well, which included the Oval Office recordings in my possession. But they did not put an gag order on me in any way after the fact. No, to answer your question, no, I do not have that. Was
Evelyn Lincoln fearful for her life?
Evelyn Lincoln was very scared about the situation. She was very aware of and warned the president before he went to Dallas that her husband had overheard that he would be shot out of Dallas, and this came from the Secret Service themselves under Lyndon Johnson. So she was very concerned. Robert Kennedy had told her that his brother had died to prevent World War III, but this information could not be released at the time, and she was fired immediately. She was ordered by Robert Kennedy to get the materials of his brother out of the Oval Office as quickly as possible and to secure those materials. She was scared for her life and actually left the country, as did some of the others that were close involved in this. They left the United States for long periods of time.
And your wife Michelle is listed as the co-author of the book. What kind of research did she do?
Well, there's not really any research to do. She basically took my story and made it into something someone could read. She has more education involved in the literary than I would, and of course I just gave her my story, and then it was she helped put it down on paper so it could be understandable.
So what was the role of Lee Harvey Oswald?
Lee Harvey Oswald is a very interesting person that's been mistold in history terribly. He touched a lot of corners of a lot of things. He was being utilized for purpose. When he went to Russia, he was being utilized for purpose, and of course when he came back, the Justice Department green-stamped him to come back, and his part in the assassination into history is totally wrong.
So he didn't pull any trigger? He wasn't up there shooting at all?
He didn't. He was involved, but in a way not understood. He was involved in a way that was there as an investigative situation to refer back through the FBI. He was reporting back to the FBI, and his code number was recognized to Bobby Kennedy's office when that material came back, and his information was good.
Did any of the movies or books that have been written or made since then tell us the truth?
Well, I don't believe they understand it as clearly as they should, but I certainly think there's been an amazingly amount of research done on this, and a lot of people have pieces of the puzzle to this. And of course, I have a piece of the puzzle. I don't think anybody sees a complete picture, but the thing that differs from me is I'm looking at the raw material that came out of the White House and from Bobby Kennedy, which is a non-disputable. So in that regard, that's why what happened to us. My friend is dead. My lawyer is dead. My mother, who was subpoenaed to testify against me in this situation to help the Justice Department's case, she's passed away. JFK Jr. is gone. On and on it goes. So I'm the last person in line. Of course, I spent a lot of years in federal prison over this, and I'm the last person to know this information firsthand in a lot of ways. So I felt obligated to
How long?
to reveal this to the American public. Go ahead.
Christopher Fulton is our guest. His book is called The Inheritance. He had some and has some information regarding the JFK assassination, which got him in trouble, basically. He kept him in prison for a few years. So how long was the trial? How long did the trial last?
Well, there was no trial. I wasn't allowed to have a trial. I go in under a national security ticket. They're going to break me down. My family was threatened, and of course, when you sign these agreements, pretty much things are under seal. And I'm going in on a classified testimony. There's no lawyer allowed. No. This is a national security ticket. I was put on a federal aircraft, put up at 10,000 feet in chains, flown for 10 minutes, come down, do that all day long for a month, in and out of federal facilities. This is something the American people don't know that much about, and I think they need to. I think they need to understand that if you have something that goes against the grain of the policy of the United States government, the weight that will fall upon you is many long years in prison or death.
And how did Jack Ruby, who hired him?
I don't know that much about Jack Ruby. I do know that taking Oswald out was for purpose. The purpose was to be no trial. One of the main things you learn through this process is that the government doesn't care what you know. They don't care what you necessarily have, but they do care if you can do something in court, because that changes the perception, and that changes how things work. So there was going to be no trial. That couldn't happen. There was too many national security issues involved in that, and of course, he was killed for purpose.
Wow. You certainly bring an interesting topic to the show. I don't think we have the book, right, Robin?
Right, it's en route.
Okay, I found it on Amazon. By the way, you're doing really well on Amazon. You're number 3. That's pretty good. The book, when did the book come out? Just November 8th? It's only been out a little while?
November 22nd, actually, the 55th anniversary.
Oh, okay. Yeah, number 3. That's pretty good. And you're getting a lot of 5-star reviews. Some people don't agree with you, so you got them also. But for the bulk of the...
We're always going to get that. There's
right.
always going to be people, and of course, there's people for purpose. There are people out there that work for the federal government. They're in different places in the media and so forth, and their job is there to do exactly that.
So does the book hold back at all? I mean, do you hold back some things just because you feel like it'd be safer for you and your family if you didn't tell everything?
There are pieces of information, of course, that are sensitive to the Kennedy family themselves, and some people that are innocent to some of this. And we tried to be very delicate about how we proceeded in those regards. We tried to stick to information that would be most useful to get it out there, so that it changes the narrative for the American public.
And a portion of your book sales are going to different charities.
That's right. Some of it's going to be going to the JFK Library itself, and then Marley's Mutts has a program with dogs, which they rehabilitate dogs with people that have gone to prison, and of course the Ronald McDonald House, which helps people that have children born premature, which I think is a fantastic organization, and then the PTSD Foundation of America, which something that I deal with, and I know there's a lot of people that have spent time fighting for this country that still deal with.
The Inheritance has been submitted for the 2019 Pulitzer Prize. When will you find out if you've won that?
I don't know. I've never done this before.
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
They'll let me, if anything happens with it, I'm sure they'll let me know.
And what branch of service did you serve in, sir?
I did not. My family has had a pretty strong military career. I was supposed to go into the Naval Academy in Annapolis and be a career officer in the Navy, but I chose a commercial construction path.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much for being on the air with us, and good luck with everything. Thank you for sharing this.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
This is WOCA Ocala.
Fox News. I'm Lillian Wu. The president blasting Democrats over funding for border security on Twitter this morning, noting the terror attack in France. The suspect at that Christmas market attack, though, a homegrown